Hello everyone, welcome back to Anonymous World. Hope you are doing well. So I am making a video after a long time. So in this video we will be solving a Active Directory room from TryHackMe. So let's get started.
So recently I enrolled in CRTP bootcamp. So I'm preparing for CRTP certification, which stands for Certified Red Team Professional. So before the bootcamp starts, I thought of completing Active Directory rooms on TryHackMe. So there are 5 to 6 rooms I think on TryHackMe about Active Directory starting from basics. So we will be covering all the rooms. So let's start with Active Directory Basics, which is the first room in the learning path. So it is the backbone of the corporate world, which simplifies the management of devices and users within the corporate environment. So in this room, we will be learning about what Active Directory is, what an Active Directory domain is, what components are there in Active Directory domain, what forests, trees, domain trusts, and much more. So for as a prerequisite, you need to know the basic Windows terminology and functions. So for that, you can complete the Windows fundamental module. So let's start. So now imagine yourself administrating a small business network which have only 5 to 6 computers and only few employees, like 4 or 5 employees. So if there is a small network, you can manage every computer employee without having a problem. So you will manually log into each computer, create users for whoever will use them, and can make a specific configuration for each employee's account. So what now if your business suddenly grows and have more than 100, 200 computers and more than 300, 400 different users located across 4 different offices? So can you still manage each computer as a separate entity? It will become a hectic task. So to overcome these limitations, we can use a Windows domain. Simply put, Windows domain is a group of users and computers under the administration of a given business. So what is Active Directory? The main idea behind a domain is to centralize the administration of common components of Windows computer network in a single repository, which is called Active Directory. And the server which runs the Active Directory is known as domain controller. So you can see here is a domain tryhackme.com. There are workstation, desktop, database server, file server, everything is running inside that domain controller. So what are the main advantages of having configured Windows domain? First, centralized identity management. Every user across the network can be configured from Active Directory with very minimal effort. Managing security policies. You can configure security policies directly from Active Directory and apply them to users and computers across the network as needed. So a real world example is given here. So suppose in a school or university networks, you are provided with a username and password that you can use on any computers available on the campus with your particular credentials. So they are valid for all machines because whenever you input them on machine, it will forward the authentication process back to the Active Directory. So Active Directory is also the component that allows your school or university to restrict you from accessing the control panel in your machines, university machines. Policies will usually be deployed throughout the network, so that you don't have administrative privileges over those computers. So here is our first task. During this task, we will assume the role of a new IT admin at THM Incorporation. So in our first task, we have been asked to review the current domain thm.local, and so we need to do some additional configurations. We have administrative credentials over a pre-configured domain controller to do tasks. So be sure to click Start Machine. Let's start our machine. Okay, it's getting started. So you can also connect via RDP. When connecting via RDP, use THM administrator as a username to specify that we want to log in using the user administrator on the domain THM. So let's wait until our machine start. Okay, so our machine is started. Let's answer the question below. In a Windows domain, credentials are stored in a centralized repository called, okay, so it's directory. The server in charge of running the Active Directory services is called domain controller. We just saw these terms. Now task 3, Active Directory. So the core of any Windows domain is the Active Directory domain service. It acts as a catalog that holds the information of all the objects that exist on the network. So now what are the objects? So, objects supported by AD are users, groups, machines, printers, shares, and many others. So there are explanation of some of them. So first is users. So these are most common object types in Active Directory. Users are one of the objects known as security principals, meaning that they can be authenticated by the domain. Example of users are peoples who are using computer, like employees, then services like IAS or MS SQL. Every single service require a user to run, but service users are different from regular users, as they will only have the privileges needed to run their specific service. Next is machines. So these are another type of object within Active Directory. For every computer that joins the Active Directory domain, a machine object will be created. So the number of machine is equal to the number of objects will be created. So these are also considered security principles and are assigned an account just as any regular user. Okay, so the account has somewhat limited rights within the domain itself. The machine accounts themselves are local administrator on the assigned computer. So they are generally not supposed to be accessed by anyone except the computer itself. Machine account passwords are automatically rotated out and are generally comprised of 120 random characters. So how to identify these machine accounts? So identifying machine accounts is relatively easy. They follow a specific naming scheme. The machine account name is the computer's name followed by a dollar sign. So example, let's say the computer name is DC01. So the account will be DC01 dollar. So let's suppose the account name is a machine name is John. So then machine account will be called John dollar. Security groups. So if you are familiar with Windows, you probably know that you can define user group to assign access rights to files or other resources to entire group instead of single users. So what is the benefit of this? So this allows for better manageability, as you can add users to an existing group and they will automatically inherit all of the group's privileges. So you create a group, assign policy to the group, and then you can directly add the number as so you can directly assign users to that group, so they will directly inherit all the privileges or policies or restrictions that are been applied on that group. So groups can have both users and machines as members. If needed, groups can include other groups as well. So several groups are created by default in a domain that can be used to grant specific privileges to users. So some examples are given here. So first one is domain admins. So users of this group have administrative privileges over the entire domain. So they are the main ones. By default, they can administer any computer on the domain, including the domain controllers. Then server operators. Users in these groups can administer domain controller. They cannot change any administrative group memberships. Then there are backup operators, account operators, domain users, which includes all existing user accounts in a domain, domain computers that includes all existing computers, and then domain controllers include all existing domain controllers on the domain. So you can obtain complete list of default security groups from the Microsoft documentation here. You can visit to this URL. Okay, so now Active Directory users and computers. So here is a documentation of Active Directory security groups. So you can give it a read. The group scope is given here. Each group has a scope that identifies the extent to which the group is applied. So Active Directory defines the following groups, three group scopes: universal, global, and domain local. So you can go through this. Let's go ahead. Active Directory users and computers. So to configure users, groups, or machine in AD, we need to log in into domain controller and then run Active Directory users and computers from the start menu. Okay, so we are already logged in. Let's go there. Okay, so here is Active Directory users and computers. So this will open up a window where we can see the hierarchy of users, computers, and groups. Okay, great. These objects are organized in organizational units, which are container objects that allow you to classify users and machines. So these are organizational units, IT, management, marketing, research and development, sales. Okay, so organizational units are mainly used to define sets of users with similar policy requirements. So the people in sales department of organizations are likely to have a different set of policies applied than the people in IT or management or marketing. So every department has different rules. So they will have different policies as well. So in our machine, we can see that there is already an OU called THM with 4 child OUs. So THM is the parent organizational unit, and it has many other child organizational units for IT management, marketing, and sales department. Okay, so it is very typical to see the OUs mimic the business structure as it follows for efficiently deploying baseline policies. Okay, so feel free to right click the THM organizational unit and create a new organizational unit under it called students just for the fun of it. So let's create an organizational unit just for the fun. So we can go to new, then organizational unit. Here are more options like user, printer, computer, contact, group. So let's name it just for fun. So there is a checkbox protect container from accidental deletion. So it will protect our organizational unit from deleting it accidentally. Okay, so our new organizational unit is created under the parent OUTHM. So if we open any OU, we can see the users they contain and perform simple tasks like creating, deleting, or modifying them as needed. We can also reset the password if needed. Pretty useful for the help desk. So let's see. Okay, so IT have 3 users: Claire, Mary, and Philip. Then management have Daniel, marketing has Mark, R&D has Bob, sales has Christine, Robert, Sophie, and Thomas. Okay, so we can also reset password if needed. So you probably noticed already that there are other default containers apart from THM organizational unit. So these are called containers like bulletin, computer, domain controller, foreign security principles. These containers are created by Windows automatically and contain the following. So bulletin contains default group available to any Windows host. So these are default groups available on any Windows host. Then second one is computers. Any machine joining the network will be put here by default. You can move them if needed. So there are these many computers, and these are servers DB01, DB02, Web01. Then there is domain controllers, default organization unit that contain the DCs in our network, which is AD basics. Then there is managed service accounts. So hold accounts used by services in your domains. So there are no items currently here. Now security groups versus organization units. So it is quite. So we will probably wondering why we have both groups and OUs. So while both are used to classify users and computers, their purpose are entirely different. So organizational units are handy for applying policies to users and computers that include a specific configuration that pertain to sets of users depending on their particular role in the enterprise. Okay, so in organizational unit, a user can only be a member of single organizational unit at a time. So for example, Claire, Mary, or Philip are part of ITOU, so they can't be part of any other ITOU. They cannot be part of any other OU available here, like sales, research, development, or marketing, or anything. In security groups are used to grant permission over resources. For example, we will use groups if we want to allow some user to access a shared folder or network printer. A user can be part of many groups, which is needed to grant access to multiple resources. So which group normally administrates all computers and resources in a domain? So domain admins. Okay. So what will be the name of the machine account associated with a machine named Tom PC? So we know that in the machine account, dollars are added at the end. Great. Suppose our company creates a department of quality assurance. What type of containers should we use to group all quality assurance users so that policies can be applied consistently to them? So we will be using organizational unit container because policies can be applied consistently to them. Great. So let's go ahead managing users in Active Directory. So our first task as the new domain administrator is to check the existing ADOUs and users as some recent changes have happened to the business. So we have been given organizational chart. So in management, there Daniel is general manager, marketing Mark, sales Sophie and Thomas, and then IT there are three users Philip, Mary, and Claire. Okay, so deleting extra OUs and users. So the first thing you should notice is that there is an additional department OU in your current AD configuration that doesn't appear in the chart. We have been told it was closed due to budget cuts. Okay, so research and development is the extra OU here. So we have IT, management, marketing, and sales. Just for fun is also additional, but we created it just for fun. Okay, so if you try to right click and delete the OU, you will get the following error. It is because of because it is preventing accidental deletion. So you do not have sufficient privileges to delete research and development, or this object is protected from accidental deletion. Okay, so by default, OUs are protected against accidental deletion. So to delete the OU, we need to enable the advanced feature in the view menu. Okay, so let's enable advanced features. Okay, so let's see the properties. We need to go to object and then we need to uncheck this protect object from accidental deletion. Okay, so I think now we can delete this. So let's delete this. Great. Okay, so now we are okay. Now the next thing is delegation. So it is one of the nice thing that we can do in AD is to give specific users some control over some OUs. So this process is known as delegation. So this allows to grant user specific privileges to perform advanced tasks on OUs without needing a domain administrator to step in. So one of the most common use cases of this is granting IT support the privileges to reset other low privileged users password. So there are main four OUs: IT, management, marketing, and sales. So we can give delegate permission to IT for resetting password for other OUs like management, marketing, and sales. So the main administrator does not have to interfere. Okay, so for this example, we will delegate control over the sales OU to Philip. To delegate control over an OU, you can right click it and select delegate control. Okay, so let's delegate control. Next, so selected users and groups we can add here. To avoid mistyping the user's name, right Philip and click the check names button. Okay, so Philip. Okay, so it automatically completed it. Let's okay. Next, so delegate the following common tasks. So we need to do reset user password and force password change it next logon. We can also enable more operations like create, delete, and manage, generate resultant, manage group policy links, create, delete, and manage user accounts, read all user information. Okay, so let's go ahead, finish. So now Philip can reset password, the force logon for the sales department for any users. So while you will probably want to repeat these steps to delegate the password to marketing management departments, will it here for this task, you are free to continue to configure. So now we can configure the same thing for my management and marketing too if we want to. So now let's use Philip's account to try and reset Sophie's password. Here are Philip's credential for you to log in via RDP. So now we need to use Philip account to try and reset Sophie's password, which is in sales department. So we need to log in via RDP to Philip's computer. When connecting via RDP, use THM Philip as username. It is why we want to log in using the user Philip on the THM domain. So let's use our attack box. You can also use your own machine. So while you may be tempted to go to AD user and computer to try and test Philip's new powers, it doesn't really have the privileges to open it. So we will have to use other methods to do password resets. So in this case, we will use a PowerShell. So let's open until our attack box opens. Yes, our attack box is open. So let's connect via Ramina internet. What's the IP address for our machine? 10.10.154.178. Okay, let's enter the credentials. Yep, password is year 2008. Great, we are connected. So now we can't open Active Directory users and computers. Let's try to open it once. Uh, we need to enter admin username and password. Okay, so let's go to PowerShell. So now we need to reset the password and create a new password for Sophie. Sophie is just getting hacked. So set AD account password. Then the user Sophie. Then the next flag reset new password. Then read host. PowerShell syntax are then it will ask for a prompt. So prompt, let's say enter new password verbose. Verbose is a amazing flag. Okay, so it's asking for a new password, so let's enter any new password. 1@40. Let's say if it works. Oh, so it worked. So the password has been changed. So since we wouldn't want Sophie to keep on using password we know, we can also force a password reset at the next login with the following command. Yeah, ethical. So you can use this following command: set ed user, change password at logon, true identity, then username Sophie, verbose. So whenever she will log into her account, she need to change the password at login. So now let's connect to Sophie. So THM Sophie, new password 1@40. Great, we are logged in. What was the flag found on Sophie's desktop? So here is the flag. THM and thanks for contacting support. Should be here. Great. The process of granting privileges to a user over some OU or other AD object is called delegation. Great. Now moving on to the next task. managing computers in AD. So by default, all the machines that join a domain, except for DCs, we will be put in container called computers. If we check our domain controller, we will see that some devices are already there. So let's go back to our previous machine. Okay, so in computers, you can see there are many machines available: Philip, Sophie, Thomas, Claire, Daniel, Mark. So we can see some servers, some laptops, and some PCs corresponding to users in our network. Having all our devices there is not the best idea, since it's very likely that we want different policies for different servers and the machines that regularly use on daily basis. So while there is no golden rule on how to organize your machines, an excellent starting point is segregating devices according to their use. So in general, they are divided into three categories. First, workstations. These are the most common devices within AD. Each user in domain will likely to be logging into a workstation for doing their work or normal browsing activities. Then second is servers. Servers are generally used to provide services to users or other servers. And the last one is domain controllers. They allow to manage the Active Directory domain. These devices are often deemed the most sensitive devices within the network. Why? Because they contain hash password of all users' account within the environment. Since we are tidying up our AD, let's create two separate OUs for workstation and servers. Domain controllers are already created by Windows, so we will be creating them directly under the THM local. So let's create two new OUs. New, then so first one is workstation. Okay, typo, and the another one is servers. So now move the personal computer and laptops to workstation OU and the servers to the server OU from the computer container. So let's go to computers container. So we need to move personal computer and laptops to a workstation. So Phillips, Sophie, Thomas, Claire, Mary. So right click, move. So we'll move them to workstations. Wait. So after and what, and the servers to the servers OU. Servers to the servers OU. So now after organizing the available computers, how many ended up in the workstation OU? So let's go to workstation OU. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is it recommendable to create separate OUs for servers and workstations? Definitely yes. So moving to the next task, group policies. So till now we have organized users and computers in OUs just for the sake of it. But the main idea behind this is to be able to deploy different policies for each OU individually. So this is our main goal. So that way we can push different configurations and baselines so to users depending on their departments. So Windows manages such policies through group policy objects. They are simply a collection of settings that can be applied to OUs. So they can contain policies aimed at either users or computers, allowing to set a baseline on specific machines and identities. So to configure group policies object, we can go to group policy management tool. Okay. So the first thing we will see opening it is a complete OU hierarchy as defined before. So this is our complete OU hierarchy. THM we created workstation also. We created servers. Okay. So to configure group policies, you first create a GPU under group policy objects. So it was group policy objects. There are three available from beforehand: default domain control policy, default domain policy, and RDP policy. Okay. Default default domain policy and RDP policy are linked to THM local domain as whole, and the third one is linked to the domain controller OU only. So if we click on this, you can see location is domain controllers. For default domain policy is thm.local, and RDP policy is also linked to THM local. So something important to have in mind is that any GPO will apply to the linked OU and any sub OUs under it. For example, the sales OU will be still affected by the default domain policy. Let's examine the default domain policy to see what's trying the GPU. So let's go to default domain policy. Okay, so the first tab is scope, which is where the GPU is linked in the AD. It shows the scope, so the scope is THM local. So as you can see, you can also apply security filtering, okay, so that they are only applied to specific users and computers under an OU. By default, they will apply to the authenticated users. So by default, it is to authenticated users. We can add more here. Okay. The setting tabs include the actual contents of the group policy objects. So these are the actual contents, details, domain name, everything is given here. Security filtering to authenticated users, delegation, okay, then policies, everything is given here. As stated before, each GPU has configuration that apply to computers only and configuration that apply to users only. So there are two configuration policies. First applies to only computers, and this another one applied only to users. Okay, so you can see one is general, the other one is computer configuration, and other one is user configuration. So feel free to explore the GPU and expand on the available item using the show links on the right side of each configuration. Okay. So in this case, the default domain policy indicates really basic configuration that should apply to most domains, including password and account logout policies. So you can see policies, security settings, account policies, password policy. So enforce password history, 24 passwords remembers, maximum password is 42 days, minimum password length is 7 characters, which are set beforehand. So since the GPU applies to whole domain, any change to it would affect all computers. So all computers under 2HM local will be affected. So let's change the minimum password length policy to require users to have at least 10 characters. So right click on default domain policy, edit. Okay, so let's go to computer configuration, policies. Okay, Windows settings. Under that, we need to go to security settings, and then there is account policies, then password policy. So okay, so we can edit it here. Let's change it to 10. Let's change it to 11. Now the change will affect all the computers. Okay, so as you can see, plenty of policies can be established in the GPU. While explaining every single of them be impossible in a single room, so we can explore it on our own by double clicking on any of the policy and then going to the explain tab. So it will explain all the policies. So for example, it is minimum password length audit. This security setting determines the minimum password length for which password length audit warning mails are issued. Like this, we can explore every policy available here. Now, GPU distribution. They are distributed to the network via a network share called sysvol, which is stored in the domain controller. All users in the domain should typically have access to this share over the network to sync their GPUs periodically. The sysvol share points by default to the C Windows sysvol directory on each of the DCs in the network. So whenever once a change has been made to any of the GPUs, it can take up to 2 hours for computers to catch up with the change. So in case if you want to force any particular computer to sync its GPU immediately, we can always run the given command gp update force. So now let's create some GPUs for our domain THMINC. As part of a new job, we have been tasked with implementing some GPUs to allow us to block non-IT users from accessing the control panel and make workstation and servers log their screen automatically after 5 minutes of users inactivity to avoid leaving their sessions exposed. Okay, let's focus on each of those and define what policies should enable in each GPU and where they should be linked. Okay, so let's create a new GPU called restrict control access panel. Restrict, restrict control panel access. So right click on group policy object, new, then name it restrict control panel access. Okay, so now we can edit this. Let's go to user configuration, policies, administrative template, control panel. So here is a option, prohibit access to control panel and PC settings. So we can edit this and change it from not configured to enabled. Okay, so description at disables all control panel programs and the PC settings app. So it is done. Okay, now so once the GPU is configured, we will need to link it to all of the OUs corresponding to users who shouldn't have access to the control panel of their PCs. So for this case, we will link the marketing, management, and sales OUs by dragging GPU to each of them. So when our OUs marketing, do you want to link GPU that we selected? Okay, okay, and also to the sales. Great. So if we go there, these are linked with our OUs, the state control panel access. Great. So you can see the location is given, marketing, management, and sales. Link enabled, yes. Now the second GPU is auto lock screen. For the first GPU regarding screen locking for workstation servers, we could directly apply it over the workstation servers and domain controllers OUs we created previously. While this solution should work, an alternative consists of simply applying the GPU to the root domain. As we want the GPU to affect all of our computers, because workstation servers and domain controllers all are part of all are child OUs of the root domain, so they will inherit its policies. So the root domain is here is thm.local. Okay, so you might notice that if our GPU is applied into the root domain, it will also be inherited by other OU like sales or marketing. So let's create a new GPU, call it auto lock screen, and edit it. So let's create a new auto lock screen. So let's edit this. So it will be available in computer configuration, policies, Windows settings, and security settings, I guess. Then we need to go in local policies, security options. Great, there are a hell lot of policies available. So we need to enable which one? Interactive log on machines inactivity limit. Okay, here it is. We need to edit this, define this quality settings. So we need to log this in after 5 minutes. So we need to enter the value in seconds. So 5 minutes is equal to 300 seconds. Okay, so it's done now. So we'll set the inactivity limit to 5 minutes so the computer gets logged automatically if any user leave their session open. So after closing the GPU editor, we will link the GPU to the root domain by dragging the GPU to top of it. Okay, so let's drag it to our root domain. Okay, it is there, auto lock screen. So once the GPU have been applied to the correct OUs, we can log in as any users in either marketing, sales, or management for verification. For this task, let's connect via RDP using Mark's credential. Okay, so when connecting via RDP, okay, again that thing. Let's connect to Mark. Okay, we are already connected in Sophie. So let's see if this work. Okay, let's connect to Mark. Password is pretty good. So if you try opening the control panel, we should get a message indicating this operation is denied by the administrator. You can also wait 5 minutes to check if the screen is automatically locked. Okay, let's go to control panel. So this operation has been cancelled due to restrictions in effect on this computer. Please contact your system administrator. Great. So our policy is working fine. So you can also wait for 5 minutes to check if the other policy is also working. So since we didn't apply the control panel GPU on IT, we should still be able to log into the machine as any of those users and access the control panel. So if you created and linked the GPUs, but for some reason they still don't work, remember you can run GPU update force to force GPUs to be updated. Okay, so what is the name of network share used to distribute GPUs to domain machines? So is this wall. Can a GPU be used to apply setting to users and computers? Definitely. Now, authentication methods. So when using Windows domain, all credentials are stored in domain controllers. So whenever a user tries to authenticate to a server using domain credentials, the service will need to ask the domain controller to verify if they are correct. So two protocols are used for network authentication in Windows domain, Kerberos and NetNTLM. So Kerberos is used by any recent version of Windows. This is the default protocol in any recent domains. And NetNTLM is legacy authentication protocol, means it was used in earlier years. So while NTLM should be considered obsolete, most networks will have both protocols enabled. So take a deeper look. Let's take a deeper look. So Kerberos authentication. It's a default authentication protocol. Users who log into a server using Kerberos will be assigned tickets. So consider tickets as a proof of our previous authentications. So users with tickets can present them to services to demonstrate they've already authenticated into the network before and are therefore enabled to use it. So when Kerberos is used for authentication, the following process happens. So first, user sends their username and a timestamp encrypted using a key derived from their password to the KDC, which is Key Distribution Center, which is a service usually installed on the domain controller in charge of creating Kerberos ticket on the network. So then the KDC will create and send back again a ticket which is called ticket granting ticket, which will allow the user to request additional ticket to access specific services. So you will need for a ticket to get more tickets, but it allows user to request service tickets without passing their credentials every time they want to connect to a service. So you need to authenticate yourself only once. Then you will be assigned another ticket, which is ticket granting ticket, and then you can use it to request any service ticket without passing the credentials again and again and again. So along with the TGT, a session key is also given to the user, which they will need to generate the following request. So notice here that the TGT is encrypted using the KRB TGT account's password hash, and therefore the user can't access its content. So the encrypted TGT includes a copy of the session key as a part of its content, and KDC has no need to store the session key as it can recover a copy by decrypting the TGT if needed. Okay, so you can see in this diagram the username and the timestamp. Encrypted timestamp is used to request TGT. It goes to KDC domain controller. Then the user hash and KRB TGT hash is used, and the response is given the session key and the TGT. So when a user wants to connect to a service on the network like a share, website or database, they will use their TGT to ask the KDC for a TGS, ticket granting service. These are tickets that allow connection only to specific service they were created for. Okay. So to request a TGS, the user will send a username and a timestamp encrypted using the session key along with the TGT and the service principal name, which indicate the service and the server name we intend to access. So as a result, then the KDC will send us a TGS along with a service session key, which we will need to authenticate to the service we want to access. So it is encrypted using a key derived from service owner hash. It is a user or machine account that the service runs under. So you can better understand with this diagram. So the TGS has been requested using special service principal name, TGT, timestamp, and username. So you can see SPN indicates the service and the server name. So the service is MS SQL and the server name is written here as SRV. So the TGS can then be sent to the desired service to authenticate and establish a connection. The service will use its configured account password has to decrypt it, the TGS, and validate the service session key. So the next one is net NTLM authentication. It works using a challenge response mechanism. So the entire process is shown in the diagram. So first client sends an authentication request to the server that they want to access. Then the server generates a random number and sends its challenge to the client. Okay, so the client combines their NTLM hash with the challenge and the response is generated. So NTLM hash plus challenge is equal to response, which is sent back to the server. Then the server forwards the challenge to the domain controller for verifying the response. So then the domain controller uses the challenge to recalculate the response and compares to the original response sent by the client. So if they both match, the client is authenticated. Otherwise, the access is not granted. The authentication result is sent back to the server. The server forwards the authentication result to the client. Okay. So note that the user password is never transmitted to the network for security. So the described process applies when using a domain account. If a local account is used, the server can verify the response to the challenge itself without requiring interaction with the domain controller, since it has the password has stored locally on its SAM. So you can also watch some YouTube videos for a better understanding of this both type of authentication. So let's answer the question below. Will a current version of Windows use NTLM as the preferred authentication protocol? No. Kerberos is used by default. When referring to Kerberos, what type of ticket allows to request further tickets, known as ticket granting service? So it's ticket granting ticket (TGT). When using NTLM, net NTLM is a user's password transmitted over the network at any point. No, due to security reasons. Now let's go to our last task: trees, forest, and trusts. So far, we have discussed how to manage a single domain, the role of a domain controller, and how it joins computer servers and users. So now your company grows, so the network will also grow. So having a single domain for a company is good enough to start, but in time, some additional needs might push you into having more than one. So for that, we have trees. So imagine, for example, that suddenly your company expands to a new country or a new continent. The new country has different laws. It will have different laws and regulations that require you to update GPOs to comply. So in addition, the new country will have different office and they will have a different IT department and other department which will adhere to their the policy and laws of that particular country. Okay, so while we could create a complex OU structure and use delegations to achieve this, having a huge AD structure might be hard to manage and prone to human errors. Okay, so big mess is every time difficult to handle. So for that, Active Directory supports integrating multiple domains so that you can partition your network into units that can be managed independently. So if you have two domains that share the same namespace, so thm.local in our example, they can be joined into a tree. Okay, so for example, thm.local is your main namespace. So it is divided into two subdomains, UK and for US. So uk.thm, us.thm. Okay, each with its AD, computers and users. So this partition structure will give better control over who can access what in the domain. So it will create a less mess and it will be easy to manage. So for example, a UK user would not be able to manage US users. In that way, the domain administrators of each branch will have complete control over their respective DCs, but not other branches' DCs. Policies can be also configured easily. So a new secretary group needs to be introduced when talking about trees and forests. The enterprise admins group will grant a user administrative privileges over all of an enterprise's domain. So each domain will still have its domain admins with administrator privileges over their single domains, and the enterprise admin who can control everything in the enterprise. So every subdomain will have their own administrative controller, have their own domain admins. So now the next one is forests. So the domain you manage can also be configured in different namespaces. Suppose your company continues growing and eventually acquires another company called MHT INC. So when both companies merge, they will probably have different domain trees for each companies. So each managed by its own IT department. So the union of those several trees with different namespaces into the same network is known as forest. So let's suppose Facebook, then Facebook bought Instagram. So previously Facebook has its own domain tree, Instagram has its may have its own domain tree. So now they both need to get merged. So it will create a forest. So the union of several trees with different namespaces into the same network is known as forest. The last one is trust relationships. So having multiple domains organized in trees and forests allows to have nice compartmentalized network in terms of management. But at a particular point, a user at THM UK might need to access shared file in one of the Asia servers of another forest. For this to happen, domains arranged in trees and forests are joined together by trust relationships. Okay, so in layman terms, having a trust relationship between domains allows to authorize a user from domain THM UK to access resource from domain MHT EU. Okay, so domain from different forests or trees have trust relationship between them to access their resources. The simplest trust relationship that can be established is a one-way trust relationship. So in a one-way trust, if a domain triple A trusts domain triple B, this means that a user on triple B can be authorized to access resources on triple A. So the direction is contrary to each other. So the next one is two-way trust relationship. It can also be made to allow both domains to mutually authorize users from the other. So by default, whenever the several domains are joined together under a tree or a forest, it forms a two-way relationship, trust relationship. So it is important to note that having a trust relationship between domains doesn't automatically grant access to all resources. At last, it depends on you what is actually authorized or not. So what is a group of Windows domains that share the same namespace called tree? When same network is shared by different namespaces, it's called forest. So what should be configured between two domains for user in domain A to access resource in domain B? So trust relationship. Wait. So conclusion. So in this room we have shown the basic components and concepts related to AD and Windows domain. So it is only an introduction to the basic concepts of Active Directory. There is quite a bit more to explore to implement a production ready AD environment. Okay, so we will follow the other rooms available in the Active Directory module, and I think there is one badge after completing all the after completing the AD module, ADversary or something. So okay, that's all for this video. I will see you in next video. Till then, keep learning.